Managerial to Stokes, who's onside. 1-0.
Here's Sims. It's a good serve this from Southampton. They could finish the job here. It's Shane Long, and he has done it. Just a minute to play. Plus stoppage time. Here's Letizia. Better to say farewell than one of the finest players ever to wear the red and white.
Hello and welcome to the Saints FC podcast. And I think we're actually at episode 114 now, Tom. Not done many this season, but it felt like it was worth a chat, didn't it?
Yeah, some pretty significant news in the last 24 hours or so. Definitely worth talking about, I think.
Tom, have you noticed what my new Microsoft Teams background is?
Yeah, so that's Van Dijk netting the equaliser at home to Inter Milan.
It is.
Were you there that night, John?
I was there. I was absolutely buzzing. It was so good. It was one of the best nights at St Mary's, definitely. Probably the best evening game at St Mary's. I might go as far as saying that. And I was still living in Hackney at the time, and I remember I was like waiting, I think, for the number 26 night bus at the Aldwych in London at like 1:30 in the morning. And there was another bloke who'd also been down to St Mary's that night to watch Southampton, and we were just both like there on the pavement, still bouncing, still excited. And I've got that picture up as my background, Tom, because I think that could that be where we're headed?
Back to European. Well, I'd love another trip to Milan, John. So yes, please.
Yeah. I missed out on that last one. I was in Malaysia with work.
You missed out. It was a great couple of days. Great couple of days.
Need to make it happen again. We've got 5 games to talk about, 3 of which happened, 2 which didn't. Some games to look at in the future. But obviously the reason why I'm feeling a little bit more positive today and yesterday is because Southampton now have a new owner, or a group of men, 3 of them, who have taken over the club. One's the money man. 2 others, I think, are going to be a bit more, maybe one looking at the investment side, one looking more at the strategy side. And we're going to talk about them, Tom, and what this means to Southampton.
Very exciting. Let's do this.
Yeah. So, a little bit of detail. So, obviously, we've had Jishen Gao as our owner for a fair old while. Bought the club for around about 250 million quid. Backed by the Chinese government. And then what's also been revealed by Martin Semmens in the last couple of days was that pretty soon after he bought the club, the Chinese government informed him that he ought to get his money out of Southampton Football Club. And that, I think, probably explains the last 4 years of his ownership, isn't it? It's basically been treading water. Yeah,
it's fascinating. I mean, imagine that. If the Chinese government tells you to do something, then by God, you do it, don't you? But it's been an interesting time. It's sort of been a time of stagnation in many ways. I can't think of many things to really write home about under the sort of Gao ownership, but I think the Martin Semmens interview with Adam Blackmore on BBC Radio Solent was very interesting, where he talks about the legacy of Gao is what's happened in the last 24 hours or so. And I thought that was really interesting, the way they framed that, in terms of, yes, he's not been an owner that's been like particularly communicative or has invested his own money into the club. But at the same time, if you believe what Martin Semmens is saying, he's got no reason to lie. And I think he's telling the truth. He's like, it's almost like he wasn't as passive as maybe a lot of Saints fans thought, in terms of knowing that he needed to lose the club as an asset, but making sure it went to the right people.
I mean, it's quite interesting, isn't it? Because Martin Semmens has made a big deal out of the fact that Southampton have many suitors we've seen a few clubs change hands over the time that Southampton have been for sale, and I don't think it's been a secret Southampton have been for sale for probably the last 2.5 years. And it's interesting that Gal was asked to remove his money from the country and from Southampton Football Club, but didn't feel compelled to just take the first offer. So, for that, I think, we could probably be thankful. If you look at Burnley's takeover, they were, like them or loathe them, they're a very well-run football club. They're very successful for the size of the football club and the size of the fan base, and they had no debts, and they had a very, very good financial standing. And then they were bought out by an American outfit that used loans to purchase the club. And so those loans are leveraged against the club. So now the club's in debt despite many years of good management. And so, we know some of the details of the takeover already. We know that Southampton isn't put in debt as a result of this takeover. It wasn't bought with loans. So it's been backed with real money that's there. And so that's good. I mean, it's good that Gal didn't have to accept whoever the offer is. And then... So I do have a Serbian friend. So I asked him about Dragan Solak. He's the man who's put the money in. And, he basically said, well, nobody in Serbia has become a billionaire in 100% legitimate ways. But, has anyone ever become a billionaire anywhere? Without treading on a few people? Probably not. So the quote was, yes, he's a billionaire businessman, in inverted commas, which can never be achieved in a legit way in Serbia. That was his opinion on the guy. But he also added that doesn't mean that's bad news for the club. Quite often football fans have to put their morals aside, don't they, when it comes to a takeover. I think the Newcastle takeover is probably the prime example of that. Mohammed bin Salam is, well, I mean, you can do your own research. I'm not going to say what you should or shouldn't know about, the Saudi Arabian state.
Shillings or anything to the podcast. But yeah, we've got to be careful what you say about some of these people. But yeah.
Well, and Gal himself, it was sort of relatively public knowledge that he had to pay a huge fine in China because he'd had a local official bumped off. And managed to fail the fair and proper or the fit and proper test, didn't he? So, talking about morals, there's not any immediate red flags, I don't think, with this buyout that we need to be really concerned about and think, should we be protesting against the club because they're now owned by really, really evil people?
Yeah, and I think the kind of the plurality of ownership helps sweeten the pill, I think, a little bit. I mean, we've obviously seen, this isn't just a sort of Dragan coming in and taking over the club. He's looking at it as a business opportunity, sounds like, and that Southampton might well be the kind of flagship of this wider group. And I think, like you say, John, I don't think anyone gets to be a billionaire by being a nice guy or a nice girl. I think, you invariably have to do some difficult and perhaps murky things. But what's clear is that this isn't like I don't think this doesn't sound like a vanity purchase. It doesn't sound like a panicked purchase. It sounds like a very well considered, well reasoned and well structured deal. As you say, there's no debt being loaded onto Saints. Our debt pile is manageable as it stands. There appears to be more money for transfers this transfer window than there was a week ago. And I think, it's a really cliched phrase, but I think it's going to be evolution rather than revolution, isn't it, at St Mary's?
Yeah, and I think that's probably the first thing that we can probably, assessing the guys that are involved. So we've got Dragan Solak. He's the media mogul from Serbia. He has a personal fortune of over £1 billion. He has set up the company, which is a huge telecoms and television and pay-per-view sort of company in southeastern Europe. and very, very successful at that. He's also got a big interest in golf and some sports facilities like that as well. So, and he's, from what we understand, he's the money guy. So he's stumped up the cash for the purchase. And then the other two guys who are involved, we've got Rasmus Ankersen, who recently resigned from being a director of football at Brentford, just last month, in fact. He's also a chairman FC Midtjylland in Finland, who you'll also remember from Europa League disappointments in the past.
They beat Saints, didn't they, John? From memory?
Did, yeah. Dreadful business, isn't it? But there's good, when you find out about their history, maybe that gives us more reason to be excited about who's purchasing Saints. And then there's Henrik Kraft. He's another Dane. And I'll tell you a little bit more about him. So I think we'll get into him a little bit later as well. So, I mean, those are the three guys who've set up a business and they've invested in Southampton. And I think it's, if we're looking back at previous ownership models, they're talking about this multi-club ownership model, which is a bit like the Red Bull Group. But also I think in the way that we've seen the news developing, it wouldn't surprise me if Dragan Selak is sort of like the money man in the same way that Marcus Liebherr was the money man.
Yeah.
And then if you like, Rasmus Ankersen and Henrik Kraft are going to be more like the Nicola Cortesi. So they're more involved in the pitch and the direction and the strategy, I suppose. Is that how you're reading it as well, Tom?
Yeah, I think, I mean, it appears to be that way. I mean, this guy, Dragan, is obviously, he's an investor and he's looking to these, to the two Danes to realise his investment and to grow, what appears to be the first of a sort of small Red Bull-esque style franchise club structure. And, I'm greatly comforted by the presence of Rasmus. I think it's like Brentford are, I think we all wanted to play them when we could have done a couple of weeks ago because we felt they were vulnerable, and obviously we've got them on Tuesday, but they're just obviously, they're coming to that Premier League, and I think even the most committed football fans will only have heard of two of their players, Enrico Henry and Ivan Toney, but they don't look, out of place at all. And you'd think Southampton can take that model, because we have had a few duff transfers in recent years since the sort of the famous black box went up in smoke. You'd hope we'd be able to attract, perhaps as we're a more established Premier League club with a bigger ground, a better, a similar but better player than Brentford can, which would bode very well because they've looked very, very good this year.
Yeah, and I think kind of with Brentford, you might recognise some of the players that have gone through Brentford, even perhaps more than the ones that are there at the moment. So, Said Benrahma, for example, he is an ex-Brentford player, isn't he? So he's like one of the gems that they've picked out and sold on for big money. And Ollie Watkins as well, that's right, isn't it?
Yeah, he obviously went for huge amounts of money to Villa. And there's one other that I can't remember, whose name escapes me, but is established Premier League. But if that, I mean, that's Saints' model anyway, isn't it? Bringing through players and selling them on. But we've just not really got it right over the last few years. Yeah,
and so Tom, let's get on to why does Rasmus's involvement particularly excite you? So Rasmus Ankersen, he's the Dane who was the director at Brentford. I had a message from Billy on the Brentford Besotted podcast as well, who's spoken to him a few times. And he says he's a really, really nice guy and very, very, very smart. So very bright and intelligent.
Yes.
And how's he applied that intelligence to football, Tom?
Well, his TED talk, I think you put on Twitter earlier, was a really good example of this, of being counterintuitive and talking about how winners have to be smart. It's not enough just to be big. And I think this is really relevant to the Southampton model, which is that we're not going to be able to outbid, bigger clubs for players. We're not going to be able to offer the biggest wages. but we need to be smart about what we do. And I think we've spoken in the past, loads about sort of dinosaur managers that have been at Saints. Obviously, I think the last real dinosaur was Mark Hughes, but there is this sort of class of yet to be extinct managers that are linked with clubs like Pardew and Allardyce. Well, Allardyce is probably a bit unfair, but players like managers like Pardew and Hughes that sort of seem to represent like an older way, like Redknapp, an older way of doing things. This guy seems to be the future. He seems to represent that kind of intelligent, analytical, data-driven side to sport. And that's exciting, I think, because it kind of gets us back to where we thought we were about 3 or 4 years ago.
One of the things that I found reassuring about his TED Talk, which, as Tom mentioned, it's on our Twitter feed if you want to go back and have a look for it, is he was talking about when Newcastle United became 5th in the Premier League about, was it 8, 9, 10 years ago now?
It's season 12, 13, I think.
Yeah. And he was saying that using this example that people say the Premier League never lie, or the final league table never lies, and blah, 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 and sort of brought out some of these old tropes. Then use Newcastle United finishing 5th as an example of when the league table does lie, and about how they'd got incredibly lucky with their goal distribution. So we sometimes talk about XG on this podcast, and they'd basically had made their goals very, very efficient. So they finished 5th with a goal difference of +5. And their performances didn't really merit being 5th in the table. They basically scored very important goals in very important games that gave them a lot of benefits, which is great when it works out. But he was able to see that he used Newcastle United as an example of like bad management, didn't he? Say Newcastle then like locked in their management team, their players, etc. for the next 8 years on massive long contracts because they thought this is the way to success. And the next season they nearly got relegated. And one of the things which I like about this is I think at Saints we have the ability to believe our own hype. So, when things are going well, when we've made a few good transfers, suddenly we're preaching to the world about our black box and saying, oh yeah, it's because we're much more intelligent than you and we've got this machine and it does this and that and the other. And then like what followed the furore and publication about the black box was probably 2-3 years of dreadful transfer business, which is still hurting Saints today in terms of our performance and our finances. And what I really liked about his TED Talk is his TED Talk was almost like a cautionary tale on like, don't believe your own hype. Really make sure you know why what you're doing is a success, and also really understand if it's a fluke. And so don't get caught into that, because I think one of the issues we've had under Gal and one of the issues we've had over the last few years is every time you try and stay the same, you don't. You stagnate and you get a bit worse. But it's not really necessarily because you've got any worse. It's because everyone else around you is constantly innovating, constantly getting better and constantly striving to do better. And I get the impression with Rasmus that he won't allow us to rest on our laurels. We'll always be testing and asking the questions, well, why is it working or why is it not working? And looking for the evidence base and making the decisions based on that.
Yeah, well, look, there's inertia around Southampton Football Club. And I think, we're the lowest net spenders in the Premier League. The last time we signed I think Livramento aside, Livramento, Walker Peters, but before that, went like a couple of years really without signing a player that had a real, that really looked like they were going to make a real difference, that were going to make a real improvement to the team. Obviously we lost Ings, and I think for us, I think the Gal period has just been this period of treading water, and the problem is even if you look at teams like Burnley, I know we expect the leverage there, but someone like Maxwell Cornet comes in at just real class, and we certainly in an attacking capacity haven't had that certainly haven't signed an attacking player like that in a few years. You look at the money at Everton, still a huge amount of debt, but they've just gone and spent best part of £40 million on 2 fullbacks in the space of a week. everyone all the time in this league is getting better, but it's not necessarily about money. Brentford aren't spending a lot of money; they're above us. Palace haven't spent loads of money; they've just spent money really well. So the difference for Saints is always going to be: can we be that bit smarter? Can we, like exactly what I say, can we be 2% smarter? And hopefully that's what this brings to the table, because it just feels we've not had direction. But all credit to I think to Ralph, and I know I've voiced some doubts, but I'm back in Camp Ralph, I think. But it's to keeping us in this league, and if that's Gal's legacy, keeping us in the most competitive football, it's probably sports division in the world, then it's not a bad one.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I think we probably need to cover this on this episode, Tom. Is in the last episode we were probably a bit down in the dumps, I think.
Yeah.
And we were asking serious questions of Ralph, and we asked, it's going to be those results against Brentford and Newcastle that are going to really define what we think of him come this podcast. So we'll get onto that later.
Yeah, it is, because you ain't going to get anything from Palace, West Ham and Spurs, so it needs to be those two games.
We have stayed in the Premier League, and that has enabled us to be sold, probably at a good price, and also attract quite an interesting project team, because would Rasmus Ankerson have left the Brentford project to join a Southampton in the Championship? Probably not.
No.
But he obviously feels that Southampton can take him further than he can go with Brentford, which is interesting. Yeah. So he sees Southampton as a bigger club than Brentford, and the potential to be bigger as well, I suppose.
Well, we are an established Premier League club.
Yeah.
I mean, we, despite our best efforts over like the last calendar year, we're there on merit, and we're now 10 points out of the Premier League, out of the relegation zone for the Premier League. He's probably looking at it. We've got a very strong crop of young, talented players, including probably one of the best midfielders in the country right now, probably one of the best right backs. And I think he's probably thinking this is a place where in the next 5 years he can really build something.
Yeah. So, I mean, so we've talked about Dragan Selak, media mogul, personal fortune over £1 billion, which, I mean, it pains me to say it, but in the Premier League, that's not loads of money, is it, Tom?
Well, it's not, certainly not compared to everyone else. I mean, not compared to a number of the other clubs.
Yeah.
But I don't think, I think even if the guy had a personal fortune of £3 billion or £4 billion, from everything you're hearing, and the club is managing expectations, is you are not going to see us now go and spend 25-30 million pound on a player. What you might see is us now be in the hunt for the next Livramento. Although if I had my way, I'd kill for an established goal scorer.
Yeah, I mean, if we could take an established goal scorer and perhaps a Premier League quality goalkeeper, I think that would make a really big difference, wouldn't it?
Yes. Well, it looks like Big Fraser's not going to get a new contract, so someone's
Is that right?
He's the highest earner at the club, wasn't he, before Ward-Prowse's deal?
Yeah, but just, I don't know, offer him half the money.
Who knows? I mean, let's see
let's see what happens. Yeah, maybe Dragan Rasmus and Heinrich have got someone else in mind. So let's get on to Henrik Kraft. He's a venture capitalist, works in private equity finance. For those of you that don't know what that means, it's basically someone who has money, or they make money by investing it in very specific things. So, a multimillionaire might just kind of put their money in a wealth management fund, and that grows because it's spread across a number of different portfolios, and generally it goes up and down with the economy. So venture capitalist is someone who's a bit more involved, often they take a greater interest in the companies that they're investing money in, and they choose specific companies to invest money in as well, don't they? So you might see kind of like startup companies will talk about going for venture capitalists, and they're trying to find someone who's going to give them some money, maybe some expertise and a bit of interest. And so that's what Henrik does. And if you go to his LinkedIn profile, as I have, you can see that he's invested in, I mean, he's listed about 40 to 50 different companies. And he's got 4 main categories: business to business, enterprise, software as a service stuff. So, the hotel map, enhanced world economy, we go to lots of things on there, some of which you may have heard of, some of which you don't. But probably more interesting is he's got about 10 investments in sports tech or esports. So he's got an interest in sports. And the most interesting one, I think, is this Tonser, Tonser. Have you heard about this, Tom?
No, please tell me, John.
So there's a very interesting article on the BBC from about 6 months ago about FC Tonser. And they put a team together and they performed very well against the youth teams of Paris Saint-Germain and Juventus and a few other really big names. And in the world of football analytics, there's about 55,000 professional football players who are really, really heavily tracked. And there's really, really good data on them. So anyone who's playing in the Premier League, you know how many successful passes they make, dribbles, take-ons, tackles, interceptions, blah, 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 blah. We sometimes retweet some interesting stuff about Southampton players on the Saints FC podcast Twitter feed. But you have this pool of youth players, which is around about 1.5 million players. And these are not tracked by, Opta or any of these other kind of football scouting and statistician things, or, a very, very small number are. And then there's this app called Tonser where players rate their own teammates, their opponents, etc. And so it's sort of like trying to crowdsource an opinion on players and build up better data for these youth players. So, for example, you could be quite a hot prospect. They'd be like, have you seen Tom Parker, little young Tom Parker? He's been playing, for the Old Kent Road FC under 12s, and he's making waves. Let's go and have a watch. So a couple of Premier League scouts will have a look. What they don't know, you've had a dodgy meal last night. You're not feeling very well. You put in a dreadful performance, maybe the worst performance ever, and immediately you're written off. Because a couple of Premier League scouts have shown up that match, and now you're not valued as a football player. And this sort of application rates, I think it's nearly about 1.1.5 million players, and they're rated by their teammates and various others. And the idea is that you can get some really good players through this. Erling Haaland was on this app when he was playing in Norway, as an example of a famous user. So. That's quite interesting. It's interesting that he's an investor in that. So I think, if we're looking at, is this a Newcastle-style takeover with a massive sovereign wealth fund worth billions and billions of pounds? No, it's not. Is this a takeover from a group of very, very smart, data-driven, tech-savvy people who are interested in football and interested in being a leader and ahead of everyone else by being smarter than everyone else? Then that's the takeover we've got. It's the Moneyball version of football.
And I prefer that. But to me, that sounds more exciting. But I'm a bit of a nerd. But to me, that sounds more interesting. And I think we might also attract the right type of player for us. The Saints fans love seeing exciting young players come through the ranks. I think that's, it's a cliche that every club loves that, but I think Saints fans love that more than most. And this will hopefully help us identify that next generation. But I think as well, one of the interesting things in the Simmons interviews, he spoke about Tino. He also mentioned Romeo. This type of player that comes in, has has a strong background, but we can really drive them up to the next level. So I don't think it is going to be all kids. I think you might see, players like Romeo, where they've knocked around for a few years, not quite made it, but have clearly got a little something extra. So yeah, it's super exciting, and I think I hope that, and I imagine Ralph will just be fully on board with this. He strikes me as that type of that guy, kind of intelligent and intense kind of guy that could probably get fully behind this. So hopefully it's a marriage that'll work well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it will. And I think as well, the Saints fans wondering, are we going to see massive changes afoot? And that's another thing that the Martin Semmers interview with Adam Blackmore on the BBC did cover, that basically the guys investing like the model that Southampton have got. They like the strategy. They were interested in investing in a club that had a workable existing strategy. So I don't think we are going to see huge changes, like a complete change of the management team, backroom staff, transfer policy, etc., etc., etc. Financially, we're better off. We now know that we've got someone who's willing to invest money into the club rather than someone who's been told to get their money out of the club. So that might make us a bit more decisive in the transfer market, and maybe rather than buying one Tino Livramento, we might be buying 2 or 3 of those. But again, it looks like we're trying to make the smart acquisitions rather than, is Livramento over Kieran Trippier, should we say? You know what you're getting with Kieran Trippier. He's a good fullback. He's played well on the international stage. He's going to cost you a fair bit of money. He's a decent player. Livramento, you're buying someone who's a bit more unknown, but could potentially be amazing. Potentially be better than Kieran Trippier. Potentially already is better than Kieran Trippier.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, you're buying a 31-year-old who's allegedly on £120,000 a week. So
that sounds all right, doesn't it?
That's a lot of money, obviously, and he's got no resale value. So Livramento is someone who, in theory, plays well this season, plays better next season, could be looking at £50 million. Saints could 10 times their money. So if that's the model, then it makes total sense.
I think one of the things we need to be careful of, though, is as well, for every Livramento that works out, there's going to be a few £5 million buys that don't work out, aren't there?
Yeah, and I guess the difference is we can, that as a business we can absorb those. Yeah, I think the problem for Saints was we had that weird time where almost the more money we spent, the more wrong we got it. Obviously, Carrillo being the kind of nadir of that time, where we spend big. I think he was club record signing, and just went horribly wrong. It also went wrong before that. If you look at someone
like Wesley Ho, Mario Lemina,
Osvaldo before that. The
Augustin
more money Delgado, going back, Ali Dia. The more money we spend, the more wrong we got it. And I think, you could even say up until this season, like El Yunisi is another example of that, where a player that, we spent relatively for Saints, decent amount of money on, all right, he's come good now. But we lost 2, we signed him on a 4-year contract and he spent 2 years of that on loan. So we the more money we spent, we've almost got it wrong. Obviously, there have been some notable exceptions, but I think this is probably our sweet spot. Mm-hmm. And I think the days as well of Saints hoovering up, your Van Dijks and your Tadic's are probably gone. People are probably a bit wise to that now. People may be more willing to give players like that a punt, whereas before it was just Saints. So yeah, I think maybe this is probably a successful strategy for us, is just to hoover up the best of the young players.
Yeah, and it's a similar sort of strategy that Brentford have used, maybe on a slightly lower level, that they actually got rid of their academy because they found their location in West London. They couldn't compete with the Chelsea academy. at all. So all the best players wanted to sign for Chelsea, and none of the Brentford Academy players were getting into the first team. So they binned it off. And then they started giving players that had been released from Premier League academies a chance. And so perhaps we see that like a level up. I think they're still going to want to retain the Saints Academy, which I think will be a concern for some people, knowing that history of Brentford getting rid of their academy. But I think we can still attract a good calibre of player at the Saints Academy because of the history we've got there. So hopefully we can make that can continue to work. And then the other interesting thing is, I suppose as well, is that Katrina Liebherr still retains her 20% interest in the club.
Yeah, which is, I mean, I guess it's nice from kind of a continuity and a stewardship kind of way, and almost like a sentimentality kind of way. I think she's lost her right to veto the next owners, hasn't she? Which I think she had before. She had like a super share that could veto the owner until now. Look, that the family, the Liebherr family name is forever going to be associated with rescuing this football club. And do
you get that warm feeling every time you see a Liebherr crane or digger?
There's one in Greenwich near me, the big old naval crane, and it's just, like it. You do, and also then you see like little fridges, don't you? See all sorts of weird stuff.
Yeah.
Bloody must be loaded, but yeah, I think it's nice. It's good, and I think what I'm really looking forward to is, like, I don't think there's going to be like huge amounts of openness. I don't think you're going to see like Dragan on the pitch, almost like the kind of relationship that maybe the Leicester owners had. But I think what you will see is just more of I think hopefully there should be more communication and more information on the strategic direction the club is taking.
I mean, it would be a bit disappointing if from a media mogul we don't get any communication whatsoever, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but I think he's not from this country, and he, it might be someone who doesn't talk to the world. You do get that, but it sounds like in Rasmussen and the others, you've got people who are more used to fronting up and more used to communicating. And obviously, Semmens will still be running the club on a day-to-day basis, which gives everyone a lot of relief.
Yeah. So there's also this talk of a multi-club group, like the Red Bull franchise, or maybe the Manchester City group, or maybe the Pozzo family for a slightly more madcap version. So what do you think this will mean for Southampton? I mean, it sounds like we're going to be the cornerstone club. That's what they're saying.
Yeah.
So the main player in that. So does that essentially mean that Southampton then end up with like 3 or 4 feeder clubs around Europe?
I think you've answered the question there, John, which is it matters depending on how much it matters depends where you are in the food chain of that club system. One thing is clear is that the model they have in Italy, which is young players go out on loan and spend a couple of years, honing their skills and toughening up at a lower league club, works really well. And I think for Saints, if we can get the right players out playing, if you look at players like Finnegan, who is by all accounts really highly rated by the club, like Kegs Chalk, even maybe Thierry Small, they're going to struggle to get in this Saints team. But would they benefit from playing elsewhere?
FC Midtjylland, for example.
Yeah, why not? It can only make them better as footballers and human beings. So I don't have any concerns about it. I mean, where you have a concern is where you start like changing the club's name and changing the crest and changing the colours, which are all things we've seen in the past. And I hope that we can maintain our identity, even as part of a multifaceted sort of sports republic organisation.
I guess it's a bit of a watch this space for this one, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I suppose like where it could work in the advantage for Saints is that if you had 3 or 4 clubs around the world or Europe or wherever, they might be able to attract better players in whatever country that is, with the Saints saying, well, we're linked to Southampton, so if you do well here, the obvious pathway is for you to end up in the Premier League with Southampton.
Yeah, and I think as well, you're probably looking at this won't be just European clubs that they will build up. You know, there could be clubs in Asia, there could be clubs in the US, Africa, where I think we already have sort of
a partnership, don't we?
Partnership with clubs there. So it'll be interesting. But again, I think it just really depends on where we sit in the structure. If we sit at the top of the pyramid, then happy days. But if we're not, then they go and buy someone else, like a PSV or someone like that, then it gets a little bit more sticky.
Okay. Have we covered everything we need to cover on the takeover for now, Tom?
I think we've covered everything we know, but generally it's really exciting.
What's the feeling then? Let's talk about how are you feeling as forget your role as this erudite intellectual on the Saints FC podcast, and now put yourself back into your Tom Parker the fan shoes.
I don't think like I said, because I don't think we're going to see us splashing the cash on mega players immediately. I think it's going to be a slow burn, a 2 or 3 year slow burn. I'm excited in terms of just hearing that the club is on a more secure financial footing, and that isn't that they have now stability, because I think the one thing with the Gao ownership was that it brought a kind of benignness, which is good, but the nature of by all accounts of doing business in China is that things can go very wrong for you very, very quickly. And thankfully now that risk has been removed. So I'm not climbing the walls with excitement, but it's more of just a kind of, that's a relief, isn't it?
Sort of more of the same, but better.
Yeah. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think Saints are miles away from being a really good team. I just think this will give everyone at the club a real lift, I hope. And I think as well, it comes at a good time for performances on the pitch as well.
Yeah, I think so as well. I mean, I guess my overall feeling is sort of I'm quite excited. I've got a picture of us playing Inter Milan as the background on my screen right now, and I think that's possible again. I felt like with Gao, we were sort of on this inevitable slide. And I feel like if Ralph and the coaching team and Martin Semmens and everyone else at the club felt like there was a real risk of relegation, that with this new ownership, they would do something to make sure that wouldn't happen. Now, I think we'll get onto the playing side of things and maybe talk about what the relative risk of relegation is this season. And maybe they don't need to be particularly panicked in that, whereas Newcastle definitely do, for example. That saying, I don't think we need to be arrogant and assumptive about it. We still have some work to do to secure safety for the next season. But this is much more of a long term. And the other thing my slight cautionary feeling on this is, if you look at Rasmus and Henrik, their ability is sort of building something from the bottom, from scratch, and being that underdog, overachieving and working your way up a pyramid. In terms of the relative football pyramid, Southampton are already pretty close to the top. And I think sometimes that requires a slightly different thing, is to... the most important thing that Southampton do is maintain their Premier League status, and then the next important thing is then to improve and get better. So, would exactly the same tricks that Rasmus was involved in Brentford work for Southampton and maintain our Premier League status? Maybe, maybe not. If we want Southampton to get to the next level, which I think probably we're all hoping that new ownership will allow us the sort of experiences that we had under Koeman and Pochettino of getting into Europe and doing well. I suppose we'd be into when we were under Claude Puel, but those 3-4 seasons, I think that's where we'd really like to be, isn't it?
Yeah, I think we're realistic. We're not asking to win the league, although that would be nice. I think we're looking for a club with an identity, with a signature way of playing with exciting young players, and I think just a club that challenges. And I think this has been the really difficult thing with Saints is, to your point earlier about the hype. Every time we seem to have done well, our crash seems to have been like our come down is massive, isn't it? Like if we think about just over a year ago, we were beating Liverpool at home, and Ralph was crying. 2 months before that, we'd been top of the league. I think when we beat Liverpool, we moved up to 6th or something, and then it's just been like this incredible come down from there. And I think maybe what I would like from the takeover is just like a bit of just to get some slow, steady consistency.
A bit more of a sort of like a general low hum of good vibes.
Yeah, rather than the crushing, gnashing living room come down that has been the kind of last calendar year for Saints. It's more about that kind of just a gentle, soft, crunchy landing.
Yeah.
Sort of hard.
Like maybe just like 1 or 2 losses after a victory, but then win again.
Yeah. And no 9-0s.
Yeah.
And a good cup run.
Yeah.
We had a good one.
Well, I mean, we're quite good at good cup runs, but, to get to a semi-final and feel like you're competitive would be nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Because the last 2 FA Cup semi-finals, I mean, the one against Leicester, I think, is maybe the low point for me in supporting Saints in the last 5 years. Even more so than the 9-0s, because the opportunity was there and the performance was so bad.
But John, I think the players we've got, I know they've not been amazing this season. I actually think they've probably been a bit better. If we look at now halfway point, probably a bit better than we thought we'd be doing without Danny Ings. I think what I do think we've got is a hungry group of players. Is what I would genuinely say. I think if you look at, last year in retrospect, we were probably we carried Bertrand, we carried Vestergaard at times, and we definitely carried Danny Ings. Even though Danny Ings did a good job for us, and you can see now that those players are at other clubs that they're not, they've not flown. Certainly the Leicester 2 have had an absolute nightmare. So I think now what we have got is, I think we've got a more Ralph group of players, which is this sort of young, hungry, motivated group, talented group.
Now we just need to have the best young, hungry, motivated group of players, don't we?
Yeah, but I think we've got like 2. I think we've probably got world class is a bit strong. I think Will Prowse is probably world class now. If you're performing week in, week out in the Premier League like he is, then you're world class. And then Tino's just been named in the marker 11 best young players in Europe.
Wow.
Those are the ones to watch. So I think there's reasons to be excited, and I think if Ralph can just get it right, which is a big ask, but I think if Ralph can learn and evolve, and maybe this is an opportunity for Ralph as well to be better and to learn.
So I think we know sort of where we're going in the medium and long term with this club. In the short term, what could they do to immediately improve the fortunes of Southampton Football Club? So, I mean, we're in a January transfer window now. Are you expecting anything to happen in this January transfer window?
We don't generally get... There's no good transfers, are there, in January, really?
Manolo.
Manolo's, probably the exception. But, you don't get players that are... because really, really good players that are playing consistently don't leave their clubs in January. There'll be players floating around. I don't think Saints are far. I mean, there's talk about us getting... I know you mentioned getting a new goalkeeper. I don't think now's the time to do that, because it will look like then we have 3 senior goalkeepers on our books, plus maybe Caballero. So we'll have 4. I think what I think would be better for us is a real astute use of the loan system. And I don't like the guy, and he drives me mad. And he scored against us at Wembley, but someone like Lingard, could come in and just bring a real class, just a real element of just, we thought we had that with Minamino, didn't we? Just that kind of different level of class, and I don't think we did in the end, with a few exceptional moments aside. So
I think he had that different level of class. I think it was sort of his everything else, wasn't it? Talented guy, but
it was too small.
Yeah.
Slight. But
luxury player,
which we can't have. So I don't think we're that far away. I think realistically, we're probably not going to go and buy the striker we probably need.
Is the striker we need Brozier?
Yeah. I mean, that would be a great signing, wouldn't it?
I think that would set down a real statement of intent. I think if you made Brozier permanent, presuming he performs as well as he does in the first half of the season, the second half of the season, and then bought a really good goalkeeper.
Yeah.
What else would you do?
I don't think you need to do anything. I mean, I think what you more need to do is you need to clear out some dead wood.
What about players like Diallo, Elianusi, Gineppo, Che Adams, Adam Armstrong, Jan Bednarek? Are these players good enough for the next phase of Southampton?
Look, I think Diallo is. I think they all are. The one I have real concerns about is Gineppo. I just don't think Gineppo is ever going to make it at Saints. It's just not going to happen. I think he's had too many chances and he drives too many people mad. I think Elianusi they'll want to keep, because Elianusi actually looks like a really tidy footballer. And Bednarek will come decent again. I think it's more about, like, what do we do with players like Walcott? What do we do with like Gineppo? Because my concern is, like, even like Shane Long to an extent, although he played really well against Spurs, is like these players are blocking pathways to the first team. And they're probably on a lot of money. I mean, God knows what Walcott's on. I mean, between Walcott, Long and Gineppo, you're not probably getting that much change out of £150,000 a week. So
I'd be surprised if you're getting any change out of £150,000 a week, to be honest.
So they're blocking pathways to the first team. So for me, it's where do we strengthen that we can get real quality in. But a player like a Brozier, I think, would send a real statement of intent, because Saints fans love the guy.
Yeah.
And he's a literal giant as well.
He is. I mean, he's done so well as well. I mean, I think we can't. Yeah. If you look at the starts to goals ratio, it's really good, isn't it?
He's also doing that Danny Ings thing of scoring goals that he shouldn't really. You look at like the goal against Brighton, the goal against Palace. These are kind of very Danny Ings type goals. Right.
I mean, Tom, we've basically done this episode. We've got 5 games, I think, that we were looking forward to, and maybe only 3 of them actually happened. And we've got some games to look at in the future. And we've also got our question to answer on are we Ralph in or Ralph out at this point. So let's quickly get into this. Palace 2-2. Oh, what a free kick from James Ward-Prowse again.
Brozier wins it. Yeah, what a free kick. I think this was was this the turning point for Ward-Prowse this season?
I think it was probably, wasn't it?
Because he hasn't probably been at his best, but it was just magic. He just hits them so well, doesn't he? I mean, I think Saints have to play more for those fouls. That has to be a real strategy for us, is playing for those fouls in and around that, the D, because he's just lethal.
He is. I mean, it was an absolute thing of beauty. And Brozier's goal as well.
But it's like a Danny Ings goal, isn't it? He takes it early.
Yeah.
Doesn't shoot when you think he's going to shoot. He shoots early and takes everyone by surprise. I mean, I thought Butland maybe could have done better on actually both of the goals. But again, I think what Brozier gives us is, and we saw him against Leicester, and he didn't actually play particularly well against Leicester, but he just but we saw it, and we'll talk about the West Ham goal, is this just ability to drag the team forward. I mean, there was a funny comment I read, I think, in a Guardian review of Chelsea versus Aston Villa, which is they compared, I don't know if you saw Lukaku going through against Target. Little old Target, who we love, but like they compared it to Jonah Lomu and the England rugby team, where he just runs through him. and just people just bounce off him. And I think for us, Broja can be like that. He can, we're a team that's going to be under pressure, and what Broja can give us is that ability to bring the ball forward. And to relieve the pressure as well as score goals.
And I think we saw that against in the Tottenham game.
Yeah,
didn't we? I mean, in that second half when we were under a lot of pressure, he actually had a chance which he did quite well with. Didn't score with it, unfortunately. But it's that sort of thing where if you can provide a threat, then the opposition can never commit every single one of their players to attacking you.
Well, look at the penalty we won against West Ham.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's no way on earth we should ever have been able to get a penalty from that situation. But Broja just basically steamrolls past one and then gives Bowen, I can't remember the centre back, no option, but it kind of just has to bring him down.
Mm.
And he has no right to do that. He kind of runs from
what I think is quite, the West Ham centre-back actually is very sensible because he sort of starts committing the foul outside the box. But Broja's so strong that he then stumbles, doesn't he? And then crashes into Broja in the box and takes him out. And most strikers, I think, would have fallen at the first tackle and then you'd have had a free kick on the edge of the area. But because Broja was so strong, still saw a sense in chasing the ball and trying to get into the box to try and get a shot in the way, it actually meant that he was upright for longer and then got taken out when he was in the box, which won us the penalty.
Yeah. And maybe that's a young thing. Yeah, maybe that's a youth thing, that kind of thing. I'm just going to keep going. But Broja looks to be a different quality, doesn't he, from the strikers we've got. If you look at and Armstrong and definitely Long, I think Broja just seems to be more complete.
Well, Armstrong also has a similar sort of shoot on sight policy, but with just much, much less success.
Yeah, but I think as well, it's Broja doesn't seem to panic, does he? He seems to just be very calm. I mean, I mentioned it already. Like we talked about that goal against Brighton, where he just sort of completely puts the defender on his backside. And then coolly does it with the outside of his boot. That's a very, very sophisticated finish for like a 21-year-old.
Yeah. So right, we're pro Broja. We've established that. West Ham, we won 3-2, Tom, at the London Stadium. I mean, Bednarek has broken his curse. I mean, he broke that, I suppose, in the 2-2 game against Leicester, so we didn't lose 3-2. But this one really cemented it. He got the winner.
I know. This was a
funny game, wasn't it?
This was an amazing game. And you talk about, turning points, and it's a cliche, but again, I think this could be this game. I'm probably going to prove wrong, but this game could be the turning point for the season because it was everything was set up to go wrong. Like Antonio's back. We're playing at West Ham. We had a game not too long, a very strong, tiring game in the days running up before it. West Ham are playing really, a bit of a dodgy run, but playing really, really well. But what you saw from Saints is something you haven't really seen them do this season is have like mental toughness.
Yeah, I mean, because we gave away the lead after going, 1-0 up with a lovely Elianusi goal. Antonio gets the equaliser and you think, oh, here we go. We've seen this before. But then we get another goal. And then we concede another. And you think, this is it. We're definitely going to throw it away now. And then we go on and win the match. I mean, it's inconceivable, Tom, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think why did we look better with Forster?
I think we look better with Forster.
Yeah, he just looks stronger. He looks more commanding. So I think we look better because of that. And I think as well, Ward-Prowse shows his real quality, didn't he, in that game? Like he was just everywhere. He was the Ward-Prowse of last season, and a great penalty and a brilliant free kick for Bednarek's winner. Yeah. Impossible to defend against. But they held on. They showed the mental toughness to hold on, and I think that we saw that then move into the next game. But it's West Ham away. I've been there when we lost 3-0. I think we were 3-0 down in like 30 minutes. Was the last time I was at the London Stadium. It's a horrible place to go. But yeah, I just think maybe it was a chance for Saints to kind of show some real resilience and some real mental toughness, and I think they did that, and I think they took that into the next game.
Yeah, and the game against Spurs, I suppose, yeah, we go 1-0 up with a beautiful James Ward-Prowse strike. We play really, really well. We look like the better side against Tottenham, I felt like, for most of that first half. Although we were snapping into challenges. We weren't getting anything from the ref. Like, the ref was buying everything that Tottenham Hotspur was selling. And you could see the Salisi sending off coming probably about 20 minutes before it happened, couldn't you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Ralph had told them to get real tight on Kane and on Son and just really sort of like clatter them, really, and not let them turn with the ball. And it worked well, except it was painfully obvious that someone, probably Salisi, was going to get sent off. And lo, it happened. But if we talk before that, you're right. I mean, the goal from Ward-Prowse was just quality. He doesn't score that many, really, from open play anymore. I think it's one of those things where you look at it and you go, that's why they're professional footballers, isn't it? It's because he knows what he exactly has to do. And if he gets through the group of players in front of him, it's going in.
Yeah.
He knows that. It was a brilliant strike. It's just a moment of real class. Yeah,
I mean, it was lovely. We then had Kane scoring the penalty after Salisi got sent off. We also had Kane scoring a marginal offside. I think is this one of the things that VAR can do well? I know people don't like these very, very, very close offsides, but it is something that is black or white, isn't it? You're either offside or you're not.
It's binary. I mean, for what it's worth, I saw all sorts of post-game kind of reasoning of like, well, he's so far away from goal and he's still got so much to do that can you really claim he's got an advantage? Or even like they should draw the lines differently depending where you are on the pitch. So if you're 4 yards out, the lines are tighter than they are if you're 40 yards out, which also is, it's just more madness. Saints are very
I don't think football needs more complicated rules, does it? Than the sort of like vague rules that they're trying to interpret at the moment.
I mean, for me, Saints play a really tight offside trap. They did it in the first half of this game with Ben Davies from a free kick. And I think it's maybe a really strong element of Saints' game that we probably don't get enough credit for is that ability to play a really high line but play it really well. But the guy was offside.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a brilliant fix though, wasn't it?
It was lovely. I mean, I thought sort of fair play if you're going to lose. But then as soon as they showed the replay, I suddenly thought, he looks like he's offside before they drew the lines. I thought he looked offside. And then when they drew the lines, he was still offside. So...
But Saints were brilliant, weren't they?
The only thing was, we've just been bigging up Fraser Forster, but whisper it quietly. Should Fraser Forster's blunder been a goal for Spurs?
What I thought was really weird about what Fraser Forster did is, Fraser, my dad thinks he's a vampire because he's really terrified of crosses, and that's what he always calls him, the vampire. But what I thought was really weird about what Fraser Forster did is, if you look at when he jumps with he doesn't anticipate the flight of the ball, so he can jump with his hands up so he can catch it in the air. He jumps so that he has to catch the ball like in his midriff.
Yeah.
Which is a really weird thing to do. I don't know. I mean, look, any contact on the keeper and you get a foul, I actually think that's a really bad rule, but we'll take it.
In our favour.
Works in our favour, and next week it might not. So I think, what I would say about that rule is it is kind of applied fairly consistently. Yeah. So whether you like it or not, generally,
well, a bit like the offside rule, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tight, but generally they get it fairly consistent. When we were looking at this, we were thinking, well, Palace away, maybe we'll get something there. West Ham and Spurs we've sort of written off as we're not going to get any points from, and let's really look at the Brentford and Newcastle games, the opportunity of getting points, then we'll assess how Ralph has done. The Brentford game was cancelled due to COVID cases, which I felt a bit miffed because, as I understand it, Southampton have put in really stringent measures to avoid passing COVID around the training grounds. So the players all travel separately. They have team meetings in the car park outside. They don't get changed together. They get changed in their cars, and all of this stuff, which must be having a toll on the perfect preparation. When I went for a wander around Staplewood, they're all, the gym and the saunas and the ice baths and the physio and all of that. It's all quite involved and quite, group activities. So, I imagine that's affecting Saints. Also, the transfer policy has been to have like that depth, so that if you lose a player, you've got another player who can step in. So I feel a bit miffed that Brentford and Newcastle, well, especially the Newcastle one, which I don't think was anything to do with COVID, but more about injuries and the fact that they can strengthen their squad on a rearranged fixture. I was pretty disappointed with both of these cancellations because I felt like Saints were going well. I felt like Saints would get points here, and had they not been cancelled, I think we might have been looking at an undefeated 5-game Christmas period and quite a lot of points.
Yeah, it's true. You could argue that if they'd have played one extra game, would they have had the energy to hold on against Spurs? So
yeah, maybe not.
Who really knows? I think the Newcastle game does seem to stink a little bit. Newcastle have 4 professional goalkeepers on their books. You do wonder why they can't play this game. And I don't know why the Premier League just doesn't make it easy and say players that were not registered at the club at the time of the original fixture can't play in the game. That for me just seems to it's very hard to argue against that. Like a cup tie almost. Do players still get cup tied?
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
Yeah. So and so it's not like without precedent. So for me, that would be the fairer way of doing it, because if you think about it now, like Newcastle are going to stock up on a load of players. And it's not going to be the same team that Saints are going to play. Now, that being said, it might not really matter by the time Saints play Newcastle, because, even if they can bring in 3 or 4 really good players, they're still going to have time to gel, and they're still going to be a team of 7 plus subs that are the original Newcastle lot.
Yeah.
And so I think, that's the one that seems to have stuck in the craw a little bit. But I think, whatever you look at, they've never got Wilson for months now. Wilson's out for months. Sam Maximilian, who is their best player, and they will not be able to sign a better player than Sam Maximilian, is going to be out for weeks. So we'll see. But I think, it might, by the time this game's rearranged, and what are they looking at rearranged? They're looking at about 3 weeks in between cancelled fixtures and rearrangement. So
we've got Brentford next Tuesday, haven't we? So that's come around quite quickly.
Yeah. So we might still play Newcastle by the end of the month.
Yeah. So we've got Swansea in the Cup coming up this weekend, Tom. I think we've already said that we fancy a cup run, so let's hope they put out a decent side. Will they? Away to Swansea with a Premier League home fixture coming the following Tuesday?
But isn't this the thing now? We've got the depth. So, if you think about who might play in this game, you're still looking at probably Fraser Forster. Because, you're looking at maybe Thierry Small. Even like Perot could play this game.
Yeah. Diallo.
Ward-Prowse will play every game that he can. Walker-Peters will probably play at right back. You're still looking at a centre-back pairing of Lyanco and Stevens, or Lyanco and Bednarek, which is still a really good centre-back pairing. Up front, Adam Armstrong will want this game. He'll want to score goals. So I think that's the difference now, isn't it? Like last year, you'd have been thinking like, oh, Christ, like, who are we going to play? Because we've got a Premier League game 3 days later. But it doesn't seem like that now. It seems to be we just got that little bit more depth. And I think you're right. And I think you'll see players like Diallo come in, but I also think we're looking at Simeo from the reserves, the young Belgian striker that they quite fancy could get some minutes. I can't remember his name. His name completely escapes me. But I think we've got the strength and depth there now. I don't think it's the kind of alarm that it was last year.
Okay, so feeling confident, we think we're going to beat Swansea.
Well, Swansea haven't played since December the 11th.
They'll be well rested then.
they'll be well rested. Although the funny thing is, seemingly like being well rested actually seems to be quite. If you look at a lot of the teams that have had like real time out of the game, it actually seems to be not working very well for them.
Yeah.
I mean, this will be like the best part of a month by the time they've played again. So, and also they're training with a squad of 12 at the moment, but they have got Michael Obafemi, goal machine.
Is he allowed to play against us? Was he sold or was it a loan?
Yeah. So, he's barely played, and I think he scored one, so he'll definitely play and score against Saints. Yeah. So, I think we can feel quietly, and also obviously because of COVID restrictions, they can't play to a crowd of more than 500. So that's that element out the game.
Yeah. Do you think Saints will be using the same hotel as they did last time?
Didn't we get like thrown out, or was there a fire alarm or something?
Yeah, there was. We weren't allowed to stay, weren't we, or something before the relegation battle? I can't remember. There were some hijinks. I've forgotten what they were now.
Someone cancelled our booking or something. Yeah. Well, I think we'll go through against Swansea. I think they've got the quality to do it.
Then we got Brentford the following Tuesday. Rearranged fixture.
They've got a lot of injuries, haven't they? They've got like kind of 2 or 3 players off of the African Cup of Nations, and they've got about 6 or 7 or 8 players out injured, including Rico Henry. They've still got Ivan Toney. But again, it's probably, you've got to think, Saints are going to want to, I think there's genuine disappointment about the Newcastle game because Saints want to play these games. I think Saints probably feel like Hasenhüttl probably feels that we've got an advantage. We can press at times like this. And I think he wants to play the games. And I think they're really disappointed when they get cancelled. So I think they'll really snap into Brentford.
I think that's a good thing, isn't it, for a football fan, that your team wants to play games because they feel like they're going to win.
Yeah. And I think they'll want to play Brentford. I think they'll want to. And I think as well, they'll know that if they can beat Brentford, it moves us up a couple more places in the table, just makes us that slightly bit more comfortable. I think they'll want to beat them.
Yeah. So, we said we'd have a look at Ralph's standing as a football manager for Southampton. What do we think?
Well, I don't think I was quite Ralph out last time, but I was worried he might have taken us as far as we could go. My worry is that he'd lost the players.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's the case. I think the last 3 performances we've seen have been as good as we've seen probably since the Liverpool game. Certainly, I think the Spurs performance was actually probably one of the best under Ralph. So I think the players are still really playing for him. And I think let's give the guy, the new owners seem to be pro-Ralph, although they would say that. So let's see what he does. But I think all things considered, considering we've got 2 strikers, well, 3, who are strikers apart from Broja? You've got Adams, who scored, 3 or 4 Premier League goals. You've got Armstrong, who scored 2 Premier League goals. I think he's done a remarkable job considering we're a team that doesn't want to score any goals.
Yeah, let's not kid ourselves. We're 14th in the division. We've got 21 points at the halfway point, so we've played 19 games. That form would typically be enough to have you pretty well safe. I think we'd want to improve on that. Although our home form, we've only lost 1 at home, haven't we, this season? Yeah. Again, it's lots of draws, isn't it? We've won 4, drawn 9, lost 6. If we can turn a few more of those draws into victories, that would be a big help. Looking at the bottom 4 teams, Watford, Burnley, Newcastle, Norwich, we've got ranging from 13 to 10 points, which is remarkable, really, isn't it? At the halfway point of the season to have so few points.
Yeah, it just seems to be a league this year where Chelsea, Man City and Liverpool are going to probably win almost every single one of their games, aren't they? And then everyone else has to kind of just try and get as many points from those sort of 6 games for everyone this season are kind of a write-off. But Saints aren't safe, and we'd be naive to think they are. But I think the Newcastle situation is just so interesting. Because if Newcastle almost, they're obviously not down, but like Newcastle and Burnley seem to be just in complete freefall. And Burnley again are an interesting one because Burnley aren't going to have money to spend, and Maxwell Cornet's gone off to African Cup of Nations.
Yeah.
And also,
I mean, Watford have lost their last 5 games as well, haven't they?
yes, but I the thing with Burnley, what's interesting about Burnley and why Burnley are going to get really screwed over, right? Is Burnley have played what? So Burnley have now played 17 games. Some team, so they're now like 2 behind Newcastle, 2 behind Leeds, 2 behind Saints, 3 behind Palace, and 3 behind 4 behind some of the teams at the top of the league. So they have a smaller squad, and they're going to face now fixture congestion.
Yeah.
Because other teams with bigger squads have called off games. So in a way, Burnley's internal resilience is probably going to count against them because they'll just be playing a complete, a real horrible run of games. Wednesday, Saturday. But I think the 3 you've got there could go down. And after the week we've had, I'd love to see Newcastle go down.
I just sort of have a feeling that Burnley and Newcastle are likely to get... Yeah. You'd sort of fancy like Newcastle's millions and Burnley's sort of weird consistency might get them out of trouble. Watford and Norwich, I think... I see both of them going down.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a good mate of mine who's a Watford fan, and he is not. Safe to say, he's not optimistic. What Watford have done is they've kept their, Dennis and Sarr, who are both due to go to AFCON, and they've managed to sort of keep them by just refusing to let them go. Whether that will make a difference, I don't know. But I just. Yeah, I'm going to politely disagree with you. For me, Newcastle feel like they're in free fall, and Burnley probably even more so right now.
So anyway, we're feeling confident that Saints aren't going to get dragged into a relegation battle, are we?
Yeah, I think so. Although just looking at Newcastle's games, Saturday 15th of January, Watford at home. Saturday 22nd of January, Leeds away. The Tuesday in February, Everton at home. That's
could be 9 points.
It could be, or it could be none, and then that's it. But they'll be looking at us 3 winnable games.
Yeah. Let's get on to the emails. We've had an email from Lawrence Tall. Genuinely great to hear you discussing Saints again after an absence. We've had quite a few of these, Tom, so it's nice. Thank you for getting in contact, Lawrence. Only just listened to the pod and was in the same frame of mind as you prior to the December run of games after Arsenal, but 2 draws and a win, plus the postponed games, gives a much better outlook. 10 points clear of Burnley in 18th, compact middle of the third of the league, has 11th place sight with a good run, and agree with all the discussion on how wasteful in front of goal our strikers are and the goalkeeper situation, but maybe we have to accept the level the club is at. This is obviously written pre-takeover. Hope some good talent breaks through and enjoy the good results and performances when they come. There'll be just enough for them, for the streaky Saints, to make it through for another year of the same.
I'm a bit more optimistic. I don't think we will have another year of the same. But yeah, there's a lot of truth there. But I've got a feeling we're going to go on a bit of a run, John.
Yeah. Well, listen to Philip Palmer. Thank you for resurfacing. I was a bit surprised at how gloomy the recent podcast was in tone. I feel a bit more upbeat. As Tom said, we're very close to getting it right. In my opinion, the team are exciting to watch, and with improved in-game management over the last month or so, we'd be much further up the league. Come on, your Reds. I haven't been to a game for 2 years, stuck in Vietnam on a long-term contract until February. By then, things will have improved. Ha ha. Thanks again for the podcast. I've missed you. Well, Phil, thanks all the way over there in Vietnam. Back pretty soon to Saints with new owners and rocketing up the table, we hope.
I wonder if that guy, right, there's a guy who comments on Saints articles on The Guardian who's really well informed, and he's in Vietnam, so that could be the same guy. He's like a celebrity in Guardian Saints circles.
I mean, we do know that the Saints fans that listen to this are obviously very well informed.
They're an international jet set. They're Literati.
Nick Kingston, do you remember him? He's written to us a few times.
Yeah.
Often to complain about William Porteous Blythe's appearances on the podcast.
It's bad language.
He says, "Hi lads, good to hear you again. Hopefully it's a regular thing again. Regards, Nick." I like that from Nick. Hi, Nick.
Pithy, to the point.
Yeah. But, that's high praise for us from Nick. Daniel Atkins, also great to have you guys back. Any more coverage of Saints is a great thing. He's also offering his wares, Tom.
Oh.
He wants to be a pundit. I find it hard enough to find a time for both of us to even get together. I mean, my children are they really try and conspire to ruin our opportunities to get this happening.
Well, 2 kids, John. I mean, you're a brave man. You're one kid braver than I. So, yeah. They just don't get it, do they? They're always with I'm tired, I'm hungry.
Yeah, or I'm not tired, and now I'm hungry, and I don't want to go to sleep.
Get over it, kids. But yeah.
Anyway, so that listeners, it was good to be back. I've really enjoyed speaking to Tom, and I'd like to do this a few more times. I'm starting a new job, not next week, the week after. So we'll see how that goes. But I'd like to make this a thing that we do every now and then.
Let's do it, John. I'm doing nothing else in the evenings.
Yeah.
I've got a 2-year-old. There's no social life for me, so yeah, I'm very happy with this.
See, I did a postgraduate certificate in that period of time when I was trying to figure out what to do with the gaping hole in my evenings. Now I just have a younger child that likes to stay awake until 9 o'clock at night, and I just feel broken by the time he finally goes to sleep.
Yeah, but you don't need that. I mean, Beatrice wakes up at about 5:30, so that's bad in its own way. So there's no perfect child.
Right, well, listeners, we'll let you get on. We've been with you for an hour and 22 minutes at this point, minus whatever I have to edit out from Tom's visit from the Amazon driver.
Sorry about that.
Listeners, it's been great to chat about Saints, and we'd love to hear what your thoughts are on the new ownership and when you think Saints are going to be going for the rest of the season, and what you think this means for the long-term future of Saints. So do email us saintsfcpodcast@gmail.com. You can also find us Saints FC Podcast on Twitter. Tom, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me, John. Lovely to speak and see you, and let's catch up soon.
Yeah, absolutely. That's not when the Saints go marching in, is it? That's better.